Hello and welcome to this next video for EZ104. In this video, we will discuss about Azure Virtual Networks, which is very primary and fundamental to creating all the resources in Azure. Okay, so we will go through all the theory part of this Azure Virtual Networks in this video. Okay, so let's start. So this is the agenda. There are like important 8 points here which will be covered in this video. So we'll start with the first one. So yeah, what is Azure Virtual Network? Azure Virtual Network enables private networking within Azure. Okay, so it enables um, communication and private networking within Azure among the resources. Like it ensures secure communication among Azure and secure communication with on-prem and with internet. Okay, it enables that kind of networking that the resources can communicate within Azure or with on-prem data center resources or with internet. Okay, it features different things, like one is segmentation of the network can be done. Okay, second is it enables routing. It enables proper routing across the resources. It enables securities. Okay, so there we can define proper security policies for Azure virtual networks. Okay, and there is a hybrid connectivity with VPN or express route. So it uses VPN express route for hybrid connectivity. Planning for virtual networks. So VNets mimic on-prem networks. Okay, so it is actually we can consider actually it is an on-prem network which we want to mimic on cloud. Okay, so it uses CIDR. CIDR is a range of IP addresses. So it uses CIDR blocks for each virtual network. We need to define CIDR blocks, and it will virtual network will have its own subnets which will have their own CIDR blocks. Okay, so when we define CIDR blocks for virtual networks, we will need to avoid overlapping. Okay, so that is the main thing about virtual network. CIDR blocks is very important to remember. There should not be overlapping between CIDR blocks. Okay, and then we need to design for web tier, uh, application tier, database tier. Okay, we need to design for different tier of networks. Okay, so we can keep our web tier separate, we can keep our application tier separate, and we can keep our database tier separate. And these three can be in different virtual networks. Okay, so that is also possible. And while we plan for virtual networks, we should also make sure that we do not utilize more than what we require for the IP addresses and CIDR ranges. We should keep some space for future growth. Okay, we should plan in a way that we keep some space for future growth. Okay. So creating and managing subnets. So what are subnets? Subnets are dividing virtual networks logically. Okay, it is like a logical separation of virtual networks among different like logical components. Okay, and each subnet serves distinct roles. So one subnet can be for front end, one subnet can be for back end, and for a database, one subnet can be for a database. So we need to design subnet in that manner. Okay? Then we need to attach network security groups. NSG stands for network security groups for traffic control. Okay, so any traffic going between the networks, it needs to go through network security groups. Okay, so that is for the traffic control. And we need to plan for CIDR ranges for scalability. And we need to plan in a way that a particular CIDR range uh, can support our scalability. Okay, so when we define a subnet, we should pick a CIDR range that it will enable the components within CIDR range to scale if required. Okay, so that is important. IP addressing strategy. So IP addressing, we need to have a understanding of private IP addresses. So private IP addresses are used within a Azure virtual network and your on-premises network. Okay, and when we use a VPN gateway or express route circuit to extend the network to Azure, our network to Azure. Okay, so at that time also private IP addresses are used. Okay, so it is like a interconnectivity for internal Azure use, interconnectivity with your hybrid resources using express route or a VPN gateway. Okay, so it is like a private network. Okay, it is a having private IP addresses. Okay, and public IP addresses are like used for communication with the internet. Okay, including Azure public facing services. Okay, so whenever there are public facing services, we want to deploy any Azure public facing services in our virtual network, or we want to access any other, or we want to allow other internet applications to access the resources we have, we will have public IP addresses which will allow internet exposure of these resources. Okay. Now, public and private IP configurations. Now, public IP addresses, when we define public IP addresses in Azure, we will be given choices and we should understand the proper differences. Now, IPv4 is an earlier set of IP addresses we had, right, in the past. Now, IPv6 is new. We can select, Azure gives us option to select IPv6, which has a higher range of IP addresses. Okay, and it also allows us to pick static versus dynamic IP addresses. So dynamic IP addresses will be something which will be allocated dynamically as per the requirements, and static IP addresses like static. So it will be something we can choose and keep it static for our Azure network. Okay, so public IP addresses will be having these properties. And then public IP addresses will be used for a basic SKU or a standard SKU. Now, basic SKU is less secure and standard SKU is more secure. So for production, we should always choose standard SKU. Okay. Routing will be either Microsoft based routing or internet based routing. So by default or usually we go with Microsoft based routing. Okay. So that is given by Microsoft. And standard, as I mentioned, standard SKU will be used for production use. Associating IP addresses with resources. Okay. So whenever we want to associate IP addresses with resources, we can, uh, like for example, virtual machine. Okay, we will have NIC links network interface card, like NIC links public and private IP. Okay, so we will have public and private IP and NIC links for that. Okay, and then for load balancer. Okay, so load balancer will be like it will have front end config IP. It will have front end config IP. VPN gateway will have public IP for tunnels. Okay, and app gateway front end IP assignment. Okay, so it will be to associate IP addresses with the resources, we will have different kind of configurations for each type of resources. Like load balancer will have front end config IP, VPN gateway will have public IP for tunnels, and app gateway will have front end IP assignment. Okay. And for private IP addresses, again, it will be similar kind of resources, all the private ones here mainly. So virtual machines will have NICs will have assigned IP addresses, which these will be private IPs. There will be there will be load balancers, okay, internal load balancers, which will have private IP front ends, okay, and there will be application gateways, which will have again private IP for internal exposure, and we will be using static IPs for DNS and firewall stability. Okay, so when we use IP addresses for VMs, internal load balancers, for application gateways, these will be static IPs. Now, best practices and recommendations. Um, so when we go with IP addresses, we should avoid overlapping of IP address spaces. So whenever there is overlapping, we should try to make some changes so that there is no overlapping among the address spaces. Okay. Segment by workload or environment. We should segment the network by workload or by environment. Environment means the development, testing environment, and production environment. And workload can be different workloads of the application. Okay, so different types of workloads. And use NSGs and ESGs for traffic control. Okay, so we can have network security groups and we can have different types of security groups for traffic control. Okay, these are the security configurations for the subnets for traffic control. And we should document the IP plan that we have, so that we can keep it available for future, so that we make sure people in our team are aware of the IP and CIDR ranges we have used. And we will be also be able to apply the proper governance and tagging for the resources if we have this plan available with us. Okay. So those are some of the best practices. And in conclusion, virtual networks are foundational for Azure deployments. Uh, they are allow for effective subnet and IP planning. Uh, it ensures, like when we do effective subnet or IP planning, it ensures scalability and security. Okay, so it is not only just segmentation of the network, but when we do planning, we should allow for scaling of the components, and we should also make sure that that subnet has proper security configured. Okay, otherwise we will face some issues in the future. So we should make sure that there is proper security of the subnets. And it should integrate with Azure and hybrid services properly. So this subnet will have integration with Azure other resources. Okay, and it will also allow for integration with on-prem data center using hybrid services. And we should optimize continuously um, for performance and deployment. Okay. So those are all the main points I wanted to cover for Azure Virtual Network. So we covered subnet, a part of it, how important it is, then the security part of it, performance and scaling part of it, and CIDR ranges, and how we should plan private and public addresses for Azure network and virtual network and its subnets. Okay. So yeah, those are the important concepts to remember for EZ104. Thank you.